Howdy, I'm your host, Captain Rob Modies. Welcome to Catch Outdoors, presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network at waypointtv.com. I've written a couple of books that are available on Amazon Kindle, Bridge to Paradise, a book of short stories about travel, fishing, and life in the slow lane. Also, what I know about fishing Southwest Florida, an in-depth book about fishing the waters from Pine Island Sound south to the 10,000 Islands. Book 3, Take a Kid Fishing, a guide for introducing youngsters to the world of angling, should be available late this summer, I hope. I laugh because we're in the process of moving. We're getting ready to move to the Florida Keys from Fort Lauderdale, and it has been nuts. So the writing took a little bit of a backseat. I've been working on it here and there, but there's just so much other pressing things happening right now. So anyway, today's episode is number 47. It's titled The Zen of Fly Fishing. I did a very brief talk about this subject almost a year ago on one of my most early podcasts. It was basically part of a mix of subjects that I put together for that particular podcast, but it was in there. I thought I'd approach it again due to my upcoming relocation to the Florida Keys. What I consider, I look around in it and I say, yep, this is a saltwater heaven for fly fishing in the U.S. Obviously, saltwater is a key word there. There are other really wonderful places for fishing and for fly fishing in the north, way up north. Wyoming, Montana, places like that. There's some incredible fisheries. But in the world of saltwater fishing, I'd have to put the Florida Keys as tops for the U.S., for the continental U.S. And the Keys are barely in the continental U.S., so find that kind of fascinating too. I'm not really going to follow an outline for this one. I thought it would be more fun just to go freelance, so we'll see what happens. But I'm going to basically just share my thoughts on fly fishing in itself, doing a whole episode on fly, which I really haven't done, and talk a little bit about I don't know why people do it and why they get into it, and part of that will be my own perspective for getting into it myself. But talking about it in a way that hopefully you'll understand why we do this. I have met dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of people who don't fly fish and who say they have no desire to do so. And the main reason is two main reasons. Number one, they want to catch fish, which I find hilarious, but that's another story. We'll get to that in a minute. The other one is cost, and that I really find unusual in the sense that basic fly gear, enough to get you started and get you interested in the sport, or to see if you're going to be interested in the sport, is not that bad. As a matter of fact, it's not really bad at all. You can get a fairly decent rod and reel and a setup for a couple $100s. You're not spending top dollar, that's for sure, but at least go through the motions and figure out if it's something that you really want to pursue. And yes, you can spend a lot of money in fly fishing. I've looked at reels that are $800. I've looked at rods that are also the same, $800 to $1,000. It's entirely possible. As you progress, it's like any other sport. I used to equate it to photography, but that's kind of changed too. And then in my early life, guiding and stuff, we used 35 millimeter cameras to shoot almost everything. We didn't have the luxury of cell phones and GoPros and all that kind of stuff. So, but what you did is you upped your game. You got a basic 35 millimeter camera, the basic Canon. That was always a good one to go with. And then eventually you wound up with Nikon and long lenses and all kinds of fancy stuff. So, got kind of expensive in a real hurry. But that's part of the thing. Any sport's like that. I've flown remote control airplanes. I've flown remote control gliders. Believe me, you start at the bottom because you crash a lot. But eventually you get the hang of it. You go, boy, I sure would like to have this one. And all sports are like that. Everything you do, it just works that way. Diving, I don't care what it is. Fly fishing is similar. I think what I've always told people when I do talks on fly fishing for groups is that you have to put aside the artsy part of it. It's almost like an art form. If you watch somebody who can really, really cast, it's pretty amazing to see what they can do. Put that aside and understand that it's simply another way of delivering an artificial lure, called a fly, an artificial lure to a fish. And in most cases, the fish are sight fish. So in other words, you're upping your game. You're not just blind casting into the weeds or blind casting on a big flat that's got that kind of blue, greenish, mostly greenish water on it. You can't see the bottom in more than, say, 2 feet, maybe 3. It kind of just disappears. And so you're hoping, you're wishing, you're hoping. So you're throwing this fly in a direction that maybe you've seen movement, you've seen some bait move, you've seen some birds dive, so you go for it. Fly fishing, it takes it up another step. So it adds sight, which is why the Florida Keys are so popular, because the water's clear, Caribbean-like. And you have an abundance of open water and abundance of mangrove and cuts and flats and then some incredible species of fish. Bonefish, permit are in the mix along with tarpon, the 3 biggies as I call them. And there are many, many others that you can cast to there: snook, reds, barracuda, jacks, all kinds of fun things. But it's mostly sight fishing. So it takes that level up one more notch. But it all starts with learning to cast. So you start with basic equipment, and you don't have any idea what to do. You might even watch a video, look at a book. YouTube is covered in stuff on casting. But I'll be honest with you, it's best if you do one-on-one. If you can find an instructor in your area, and in Florida, that's not hard. There's instructors on every coast. Those of you that are on the west coast, southwest coast of Florida, you got a guy named Joe Mahler. Look at Mahler. Look up Joe. Probably the best there is over there. And of course, you could hang out at 239 Flies with my buddies there, Nick and his gang, and someone will take you out there in the parking lot and show you the rudiments. But it's kind of essential that you do that piece. In the world of spin fishing, or just fishing in general in saltwater, I would equate it to cast net throwing. You can buy a cast net, and you can watch the videos, and you can stand on the boat or stand on the shore and struggle, but all it takes is somebody with a little bit of experience next to you going, here, you do it this way. And you soon learn that, wow, there's 3 or 4 ways to throw a cast net. And boy, this is a whole lot better than I thought it was, because you actually have an instructor standing there. I remember the first time I bought a cast net, it was in the Keys, and I had a guy, he came right out of the building. We went right out in the parking lot, and he showed me a method for throwing that I used ever since. I never changed. So fly fishing is very similar, whereas spin fishing, bait casting is kind of up to you. I mean, obviously there's tips you can learn, in the world of spin and bait casting. You can flip baits, or you can skip baits up under bushes, things like that. Fly is a different game because, let's see, how do I start this? First of all, the fly doesn't weigh anything. So there's nothing to pull the line off of the reel. Okay, so you're not using something that weighs a 1/4 ounce, 3/8, half ounce, a full ounce, stuff like that. You're literally using something that almost weighs nothing at all, almost immeasurable. And it's made of fur, feathers, or artificial materials. The most weight it might have on it is a pair of little barbell eyes, which are like a metal. Sometimes they're like a brass or a lead, but they're really, really tiny, so the weight is almost non-existent, other than making the motion of the fly better. So you've got this thing out there, and you have to be able to present it. This is the fun part: 50, 60, 70 feet away from you. The cast. Yeah, it's a real problem for a lot of people. I'm not going to fool you. It's really, really tough because as a guide, and I did fly fishing. I guided for fly fishermen. I'd ask them, how have you fished in Florida before? No. Where do you fish? Up north, mountains, things like that, streams. How far can you throw it? Oh, I don't know, 20 or 30. I said, can you throw it 50 feet? Oh, maybe. I always get that maybe, meaning no, they can't, not without some instruction. There are parts of the cast that come into play. The haul and the double haul. If you don't know what that is, you're going to have a rough time fishing in the Florida Keys. There's this thing there called wind, and it's a broad open flat, miles wide and miles long. So those things all come into play, and the only way you can develop that successfully is having an initial cast that's very, very good and practiced. So that's where the instructional part comes in. Fly fishing is basically a line, a heavy line. I'll just oversimplify all this as best I can because there's no visuals in a podcast, at least not this one. A fly line is a very heavy, we'll call it like a vinyl line, for lack of a better. It's rubbery in appearance. It can be different sizes. It can be different thicknesses. It can have a heavy tip and then go to a skinnier. That's a weight forward type line will have more weight in the front of the line than in the back of the line. There's floating lines. There's intermediate lines. That means it sinks somewhat, but not much. And then there's sinking lines that go right down to the bottom. All of these things carry the fly. So essentially what you're doing is you are casting an aerodynamic piece of line shaped like an airplane wing when you do it right, behind you and in front of you, to cut through the air and to deliver the fly as gently as possible to the water. Watch a video. You'll understand what I just said if you just watch a video. The trick to this is, or the reason you're doing this is to deliver a fly with almost no plop into the water. A fly will, when done correctly, the fly line will unfold, the leader will unfold, the tippet will unfold, and the fly will lay down on the water with almost no more than just a gentle pebble, almost like a leaf falling out of a tree on water. When that's done successfully, you're going to get a reaction from a fish if it's anywhere close to where you place the fly. They're not even going to think twice about it. When something plops in the water, fish typically run, not from it entirely. They'll spin and disappear, maybe come back and take a look and then attack it. I'm not saying they won't do that. Redfish are notorious for that. But most fish don't. Most fish, if you drop something close to them, it plops in the water, they take it as aggression. They take it as a problem, and they move away. About the only time, as I mentioned, redfish will come to a plop a lot of times. I'm not sure. I don't know, it's their nature. You can put a jig and a shrimp in front of them a foot or so, plop it in the water, and they'll come right over and eat it. They will not run. Maybe it's their sight that they see it so quickly. It's like, oh, shrimp, I'm eating that. And the same thing with live whitebait, shiners, herring, stuff like that you toss for snook on a hook. In other words, the hook has no weight on it. You're throwing it with spinning gear. You've got the shiner hook through the nose. You drop it in place. The shiner skitters. As soon as it hits the water, it tries to get away, and the snook sees that and goes into immediate attack mode. So I'm not saying that doesn't work, but if you're trying to use an artificial, on the other hand, a soft plastic or something like that on a jig head, I feel you're at a disadvantage. You really are. Sometimes you can throw a soft plastic on spin by skipping it. So when it hits the water, it skips first and then hops back into a place deeper underneath the mangrove and lands more gently to draw attention to it. But, it's not fly fishing. It's just not. I watched a video just a couple of days ago of a guy, bow of a boat. He was in the 10,000 Islands. And he made a cast that you'd have to see to believe. It was gorgeous. I mean, he came forward with the fly. He probably had 60, 70 feet of line out and dropped it into this little bitty opening. Couldn't have been more than a foot wide in between mangrove branches. Put one or two little strips on the fly. That means pulling it in with your hand, stripping instead of reeling. You strip with your hand to bring the line back in. Probably one or two little strips on the tarpon, just absolutely nailed it. And I watched that about 5 times. I'm like, man, was that not only a great cast, but your presentation was perfect and the strip was perfect. And the guy got a lot of glowing likes on Instagram for it. I can tell you that. It deserved it. It was really something to see. So that's that Zen thing I'm talking about, the ability to place this fly wherever you want it to be. In other words, when you start doing a cast with fly, you're clunky. You don't know what in the world you're up to. The stuff will come fly around you, hit you in the head, knock your hat off, catch you in the back of the shoulder if you do it incorrect. I would suggest that you don't put a real honest-to-goodness hook on when you're learning. put a dummy on there. But the thing is that you're just all over the place, and it's very, very difficult to get a grip on that. It gets right back to what I said earlier. Do the best you can to find an instructor a fly casting instructor to work with you at least for once for an hour or so, and then maybe another time. And that way you won't create bad habits, and you'll really get good really fast. You'll be surprised. Let's talk about the Zen part. What a funny word, Zen. Yeah, but it's true. Most of us that fly fish by ourselves, I'll say that, by ourselves, not with anybody else on a boat or the beach, kayak, just by your lonesome. Get into a rhythm or a motion when you fly fish that you just do not get into when you spin fish. I find spin fishing for me is more aggressive. I move more. I seek spots out more readily. I make dozens of casts into a small area. I don't know. I don't want to call it like fitful or angry, but it's just, you're just on it. And you do blank out what goes on around you. Fly fishing, you do blank out what goes on around you, but it's a whole different feeling. I hate to use the word art form because I hear that a lot. I mean, people in books write fly fishing is an art form. Kind of. It's artistic in a way, I suppose, as is a brush stroke on a painting or somebody doing a beautiful charcoal drawing with really knows what they're doing. If you've watched an artist work on a canvas, you're like, wow, that's cool. I would say fly fishing is very similar to that in many ways. So the art thing kind of goes there, but the reality is it's a rhythm. It's a method of moving a line through the air rhythmically with precision, almost like with a metronome, and delivering it to a spot that's no bigger than 6 inches by 6 inches. That's the satisfaction of it. When I got good at it, I can drop a fly now in the middle of a garbage can lid. Okay, so let me explain. One of the best ways to learn, what do I call it? Aim? Yeah, aim. Best way of aiming a fly is to put something out in a field. If you've got a nearby park or somewhere or a very large yard, or I learned in a churchyard. The churchyard was only there. The people were generally only there a couple of days a week. Usually Sunday, of course, it was packed. But the rest of the time, they had this huge yard, and I could go over there and cast. You lay out a garbage can lid, something flat that's easy to see, and then start aiming at it and seeing if you can hit it, and start short. Start at 25, 30 feet, and then back up and make it 40 feet, and then make it 50, and then make it 70 feet, and see if you can hit that can on the drop. In other words, when you let go the line and it starts to fall to earth, or hopefully in water at some point, that fly hits the garbage can lid. And the garbage can lids are, about 18 inches in circumference, roughly. Some big, some small, but hitting the center is the real game. I used to practice up against trees. I would pick a tree out there and aim at the middle of the tree, and then to the left of the tree and the right of the tree. And then you can do what they call a short stop, where you're going just a little past the tree and you touch the line and it turns to the right or the left, and the fly drops behind the tree. That's a nice trick to show your friends. I would do pickups and landings. In spin fishing, for example, you cast your lure and you're not happy where it went. What do? You reel it back about, almost all the way in, mad at yourself because you missed the spot. And what do? You make another cast to the same area, and what happens? You miss again. You overthrow, or you go too far to the left or the right. What do? Close the bail, reel it back in again. In fly fishing, you can simply pick it back up when you get good at this. You do 3 or 4 good strips on the line to get the line moving. Raise the rod, pick it up, do a false cast. That's when the fly goes behind you. Then come forward on the rod, drop the rod tip a little more to the right, a little more to the left, and put that fly exactly where you intended it to be in the first place. So your use of motion is so much less, and your ability to aim is much, much greater. And that's what makes fly fishing really, really special in the salt. In the salt, you have fish that are wary. They're very good at what they do, avoiding you. They're very, very good at, once they do manage to hit something, of leaving without you. They're amazing fish. I love saltwater fishing. I love freshwater fishing too, but I adore saltwater fishing. In the Keys, we have bonefish and permit and tarpon. We have the 3 big ones, and all 3 of them are elusive at best, difficult to spot, difficult to target, certainly difficult to put the fly in exactly the right place. And in most cases, all of them are in motion. So now we add another piece to the formula. You've gone out into the yard with the fly rod, you've taken a couple lessons, and you've really, really worked at putting that fly on the garbage can lid. Now let's put the garbage can lid in motion. Let's move it at about 3 or 4 miles an hour as the fish kind of cruises on the bottom, maybe down to a mile an hour, searching for food. And the fish stops every now and then. And then it picks its head up and it continues on. This would be the case of the bonefish and the permit in particular. They love to graze on the bottom, looking for little crabs and stuff. So now you have this motion thing going on. Your practice sessions should then include picking the fly up as quickly as possible, which means a couple strips and then a pickup to get it up out of the water as fast as possible, and then relocate the fly to the water just as quick. So basically coming back on a back cast when you come forward, dropping that fly just inches in front of this fish. And if everything goes according to plan, trust me, they will eat it. I mean, it's truly amazing what aim will do for you versus just kind of randomly trying to throw in the direction of the fish. So control is everything. And learning that control, the only way you're going to do it is with a lot of practice. You're not going to gain control of a fly unless you practice casting a lot. Zen Part 2, the fly itself. There are thousands of flies, and they come in every shape and size you can imagine. And when I say size now, there's still almost no weight to them, but it's incredible. Different colors, different patterns. Most of the ones in Florida are designed to represent pretty much three things: a swimming little baby fish, a crab, or a little bitty shrimp. Those are the main. And there's others, of course. There are poppers and other things like topwaters, things like that you can throw at saltwater fish, especially aggressive fish like a jack. It's a lot of fun to throw a popper at a jack and pop it across the surface a couple times and watch him attack it. But for all intents and purposes, it's mostly represents bait. It does not represent terrestrials like you do when you fly fish up north in freshwater. There, you not only use stuff that's in water, like a streamer pattern or a pattern of like a crawdad, for example. You use terrestrials. You have spiders and crickets, grasshoppers, ants, things like that may come off of the side. You also have frogs. People create frogs out of flies as well. So, but in the saltwater, it's those main three. That's what you're going to use more than anything else. And I found that the crab patterns for me personally work best for bonefish and for permit. And then I like the small little lightweight streamer type patterns or a fish type pattern for tarpon. One thing I learned over the years was I used to throw fairly large flies at tarpon. It works a lot better if you throw small stuff. That's just me. I mean, I'm sure you'll hear it differently from different people that fly fish for tarpon, but for me personally, I think a small little bit of a fly, just something that the tarpon doesn't have to really think about it. He just sees us in the water and goes, "Yeah, I'm going to eat that. That's easy," and eats it. I don't know. I've just had better luck with really small flies when I'm tossing them in front of tarpon. So just so you know, that's something to put back in the memory bank. But anyway, you got all these flies to pick from. And the Zen part of this is you can also create flies on your own. And so that's where you get back into the artsy part of this game. It's really fun. I mean, you have a vise, you have hooks, you have dozens of pieces of material. You can go to tying sessions at different fly shops have them, and they'll usually have like a monthly session where all the guys show up and gals and sit around big tables and tie flies and share knowledge on something they've tried tying and, did it work or didn't it work? That kind of stuff. There's also a bit of camaraderie in that. You're sharing these ideas. You're sharing, like, how did you present that? How did you get a bite on that? What color did you use? And did you use various different colors of fur and feather and stuff in that to create that fly? But the Zen part is when you use that fly that you've created that no one else has, you came up with the idea yourself, you patterned it based on something you think would work based on what you've seen in the water or you've seen fish react to, like in my case, those smaller streamer type flies, and you get a fish. They hit it. They take off with it. You catch it. There's just nothing like it. I'm not kidding you. In the world of fishing, if you're a true sportsman, if you're really into this subject, into the art of fishing, if you will, it's having a fish, a big fish, take something you created out of material and fur and feathers and eat it. It just, I don't know, for me personally, it just blows my mind. I'm like, I suckered him. I got him. He actually ate that thing. And, it just, I don't know. It goes down deep, goes right down to the core. And to me, it's like, maybe it goes back to forefathers. Maybe it goes all the way back to Native Americans. I mean, back to the ancient Indian tribes of Florida. You study the Calusa Indians, and the Calusa Indians basically made lures out of pieces of bone, palm, grass, all kinds of things. They created these little lures and things to catch fish with. They used hooks out of bone. So maybe it's a rooted thing. Maybe it goes back way, way back, further than we can imagine. And I like that idea. I really do. I love the feeling of being able to fool a fish into eating something that's completely, that I made out of parts and pieces of something that he doesn't generally eat on any given day. Let's talk equipment for just a second. 9-foot rod, good place to start. 8 weight. Fly rods are different weights. Small numbers is a lightweight. Those of you that have been up north and maybe just moved to Florida, or you're coming here for vacation, spending time fly fishing here. In the north, you probably use like a 4 or 5 weight in streams. That's appropriate. That's what you use. And it's going to be probably a 7.5-foot rod, might be 8 feet. Here in Florida, you're going to graduate to a 9, and you're going to start at 8 weight, which is twice the weight that you're used to. That gets you back to those old casting lessons again. If you hire a guide and you tell him you know how to cast and all you've ever thrown is a 5 weight, you're not being very honest. So you need to let him know that, that you may need a little help with an 8 weight. When we go after tarpon, that's going to be an 11 or 12 weight. Throwing for tarpon in a lot of cases, 10 minimum, but most of the time the guys out here, the guides and myself, we threw 11 and 12 weight. So, it's just a huge difference. All of our rods are 9 foot typically. The line itself is, I mentioned earlier, there's 3 types. There's a floating line, which basically stays on surface after you cast it. There's an intermediate line, which goes down, depending on the density of the water. In salt water, intermediates will go down a foot or 2. Maybe. Again, it depends on the salt that you're in, how salty the water is as far as buoyancy, flotation. And then there's a sinking line, and the sinking line basically just sinks, slowly goes down to the bottom. An example of using, intermediate is something I like when I'm fishing in 3 feet of water. Typically for feeders in the grass, like sea trout down low. Floating, I love presenting a floating line because you can see the line the whole time. And remember that your leader line and your tippet line, which you're going to have about 9 feet of, are going to sink. So it's not like the whole thing is going to stay on the surface. It doesn't work that way. It's just a line. Sinking line, I like intermediates in sinking for rough beaches. An example of that would be the Sanibel Island area. I used to, when I lived over there, I fished for snook a lot on the beaches there. And so on a calm day, you could get away with a floating line and sight fish snook right on the edge of the water. But when the water gets rough, wind starts blowing out of the west and starts rolling that water over, the snook don't leave. They're still feeding there. They just go down right on the bottom. So they may be in 2 or 3 foot of turbulent water, and it's your job to get the fly down in front of them. So you need something that's going to get the fly on the bottom. Otherwise, you're not going to get any bites. So that's an example of where you have to switch the lines out. But to start, I think I'd use floating. I'd tell you to just start with floating lines right off the bat. It makes it easier for you to see where your casts have gone. It lets you adjust for current and wind because when you have a fly line in the water, it moves left or right based on current and wind. So it'll help you with that. The reels, man. Anything from $200 or $300 up to $800 in reels, and it just depends on how pretty you want it to be. Okay, a fly reel holds line. That's pretty much all it does. And when you reel it in, it reels 1-to-1. It doesn't have a 5-to-1, 6.1-to-1, 7-to-1 reel back like a spinning reel might have or a bait caster has. It's basically you reeling it in. So the further away the fish goes, the more reeling you have to do. And that's a reality you have to deal with. To combat that problem, you can get reels that have different arbors in the center of them. So the arbor, the middle of the reel can be small, which holds more line, or large, which holds less line, but it's easier to retrieve. So by reel. Just things to ask when you're purchasing. When you go to a dealer, you go somewhere, you go to one of the tackle shops, just ask a lot of questions about the reels and stuff. Find out exactly, why is this reel $500 and this reel's $200? Why is this reel $800 and this one's $500? And they can answer that. I mean, mostly it's craftsmanship and how they're made. You have to understand that most fly reels are not made in mass. They don't deliver them like Penn or Dio or these other companies deliver all these spin reels. The fly reels are more highly designed and more specially designed, I should say. Not so much highly designed, specially designed, and the availability is not as great as a lot of spin reels are. So that's going to be part of the issue with the cost. Okay, let's put you back on a boat. Let's put you in the middle of the Florida Keys on a flat on a gorgeous day. Barely a breeze. Water is crystal clear. Sun's just coming up. You're in position to fish. And your guide's on the back of the boat. And he's pulling you along a flat and you're on the front. You're pretty much ready. You're more than ready. You didn't get any sleep the night before. You've been at this a while. You've been doing this for about a year or so, maybe longer. And the guide suddenly says ahead, and you look up, and he says 10 o'clock. That's important. They always use the time on the clock to let you know where the fish is located, usually anywhere from your left, which of course is going to be, 9 to 3. So 10 o'clock, a little off to the left side of the boat. How many feet away it is, which way it's moving. And he says to get your cast ready. And so you start getting your line stripped out. You get it untangled from around your feet. Make sure everything's ready to go. And you're getting ready to put that fly in the air. And he says, here it comes, here it comes. Okay, it's at 50 feet. Start your cast. And you start your cast. He tells you which way it's moving and where he wants you to put the fly. Put the fly at 12. Put the fly at 12 o'clock right now. Put it at 12. And you drop it at 12. And he says, hold it, strip, strip, strip. And you strip. And that fish hits it. And it's tarpon. And the line comes tight. And it starts to peel out between your fingers and comes up off the deck. And you pray it doesn't get knotted or twisted or tied around the reel. Everything goes perfectly. The line comes off, snaps against the rod, and you're on the reel. And the tarpon comes screaming out of the water. And you've done everything right. The first 30 seconds have gone just like they're supposed to go. And you're hooked up with probably one of the most magnificent fish that the Florida Keys has to offer. Enjoy this. You've worked hard at it. You've practiced. You've cast. You got it down. And now you're hooked up with just a magnificent fish. Enjoy every minute of it. And hopefully in the next 25, 30 minutes, you'll get it landed at both sides and you'll get to touch the leader on your very first tarpon on fly. Good luck out there. I hope you get to do it. I really do. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell a friend and leave a review. My podcasts are scheduled for each and every Tuesday. Catch You Outdoors is presented by the Waypoint Podcast Network. It's available on Waypoint and by many of your favorite podcast providers. Facebook page is Catch You Outdoors. The website is waypointtv.com and catchyoutdoors.com. Until next time, get outdoors and enjoy.